On May 4, 1945, dawn breaks over the shattered streets of Hamburg, Germany. The air hangs heavy with the acrid tang of smoke from smoldering ruins, mingling with the faint, sickly sweet rot of unburied bodies. Private Thomas Wilkins, a wiry 22-year-old from Manchester with the British 11th Armoured Division, grips his Lee Enfield rifle tighter as his Humber Scout car rumbles past the skeletal frames of bombed-out buildings. The engine's growl echoes off the walls, but it's the silence that unnerves him. The kind that follows a storm, broken only by the distant wail of a child or the crunch of boots on rubble. You can almost hear the collective breath held by the hidden eyes watching from behind cracked windows. Wilkins scans the doorways, half expecting a sniper's crack. But the war is over here, or so they've been told. Hitler is dead, the Reich in ashes. Yet victory feels like a hollow echo. His mates in the convoy joke nervously about Jerry birds, waiting to throw themselves at the liberators. But Wilkins knows better. Montgomery's orders are clear. No fraternization. No talking, no touching, no pity for the enemy. They're occupiers now, not saviors. As the vehicle halts at a crossroads, a group of women emerges from a cellar door. Gaunt faces smeared with dirt, dresses torn and patched, eyes wide with a mix of fear and desperate hope. One, a young mother clutching a toddler, steps forward hesitantly, her voice a whisper in broken English. "Brat? Please, bread for the child." Wilkins feels a tug in his chest, the human pull against the steel of discipline. His sergeant, a grizzled veteran named Hargreaves, barks from the turret, "Eyes front, lads, remember the rules." These are the same lot that cheered the Luftwaffe over London. But not all follow the script. Later that afternoon, as the division sets up a temporary billet in a requisition schoolhouse, Wilkins overhears murmurs from the rear guard. A couple of Tommies from the Royal Scots have slipped away, drawn by the allure of a nearby farm where women huddle for safety. Whispers of cigarettes traded for kisses, or worse, forced encounters in the shadows. It's not the first rumor. Back in the Rhineland crossings, there were stories of isolated incidents, soldiers venting the pent-up rage of years in the trenches on the civilians left behind. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, the architect of the Allied push across the Elbe, had foreseen this chaos. His non-fraternization directive, issued in March, was ironclad. "You must be very correct in your dealings with the Germans. There must be no fraternization. This is absolute." He knew the temptations, the loneliness of soldiers far from home, the intoxicating rush of power over a defeated foe. Yet enforcement varied. In Hamburg's outskirts, Captain Reginald Ellis of the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry turns a blind eye to his men's bartering with locals for eggs and milk, but draws the line at anything more intimate. "We're not beasts," he mutters to his adjutant. "But war makes monsters of us all." As night falls, the city's blackout lifts unevenly, flickering lanterns casting long shadows. Wilkins stands guard at a checkpoint, the chill seeping through his battle dress. A woman approaches, mid-30s, blonde hair matted, carrying a bundle of laundry. She doesn't beg. Instead, she offers a faint smile, her eyes pleading for something unspoken. Safety, companionship, or just a moment of humanity in the ruins. Wilkins hesitates, his hand hovering near his webbing pouch. A chocolate bar could bridge the gap, but so could one word too many. Suddenly, shouts erupt from a nearby alley. Two soldiers from the Durham Light Infantry drag a screaming girl, no older than 18, toward an abandoned warehouse. Her cries cut through the dusk like shrapnel. "Neen, bit." Wilkins' blood runs cold. Is this the true face of liberation? The sergeant intervenes, rifle raised, but the damage is etched in the air. Rumors will spread, and fears will fester. And in the British zone, where discipline holds but frays at the edges, the line between conqueror and criminal blurs. What happens when the victors become the villains in the eyes of the vanquished? When orders clash with urges, and humanity hangs by a thread. June 12, 1945. A sweltering afternoon in the British zone, near Celle in Lower Saxony. Sergeant Alan Brooks, a battle-hardened veteran of the North African Campaign and Normandy landings with the 7th Armored Division, the desert rats, wipes sweat from his brow as he oversees a work party clearing rubble from a bombed-out railway station. The air is thick with dust, the metallic tang of twisted steel, and the ever-present stench of decay from nearby collapsed buildings. His men, stripped to their shirt sleeves, shovel debris alongside a dozen German women, their heads wrapped in scarves, faces etched with exhaustion. You can sense the tension in the guarded glances and the deliberate avoidance of eye contact. Montgomery's non-fraternization order hangs over them like a storm cloud. No talking, no sharing cigarettes, no smiles. They're the enemy, the briefing had drilled into them. Every one of them cheered the bombers over Coventry. But Brooks watches as one of his lads, young Private Davies from Wales, pauses to hand a canteen to a woman in her late 20s. Frau Elsa Muller, widowed, with 2 children hidden in a nearby farmhouse. She takes a sip gratefully, her cracked lips trembling. Davies mutters something low. She nods. A small act, but enough for Brooks to bark. Davies, eyes on your work. Remember the bloody order. Enforcement is patchy, though. In the officers' mess that evening, over tepid tea and tinned bully beef, Captain Harold Finch confides to his colleagues that the policy is bloody impractical. Finch, educated at Sandhurst, knows the brass fears venereal disease and compromised discipline. But out here, with millions starving and the black market blooming, isolation feels cruel. Reports filter in from military police patrols. Isolated rapes, yes, drunken soldiers forcing themselves on women in remote farms, but far fewer than in the Soviet zone, where horror stories trickle west. British courts-martial are swift when caught. A corporal from the Royal Engineers was recently sentenced to hard labor for assaulting a girl near Hanover. Yet the pull is undeniable. Hunger drives it. German women, dubbed Fräuleins in whispered Baroque talk, trade favors for food, soap, chocolate from Nafi rations. Not all coerced. Survival demands pragmatism. In Bremen, Lieutenant Colonel James Whitby notes in his diary how his drivers barter cigarettes for companionship, turning blind eyes when possible. We're not the Red Army, he writes, but power corrupts all the same. Whitby recalls a checkpoint incident. A Tommy caught with a local girl, fined, and demoted, but the girl, sent away with a warning, branded a collaborator by her neighbors. By July, cracks widen. Montgomery relents slightly, conversation in public is allowed, and children are no longer off-limits. Troops cheer. Playgrounds fill with British sweets tossed to wide-eyed kids. But intimacy, still forbidden. In Cologne's ruins, Corporal Ian Fletcher meets Greta, a former nurse, while distributing Red Cross parcels. Their stolen moments in shadowed doorways feel like defiance. She's no Nazi, he tells his mate, just a woman trying to feed her family. Discipline holds, mostly. Military police investigate complaints rigorously. Convictions for rape are rare but real, and punishments are harsh to set examples. Yet whispers persist. Some officers overlook arrangements if discreet. The line blurs, conquerors with absolute power, facing desperate civilians. Is it exploitation, compassion, or the inevitable thaw of human contact? As summer fades, reports reach London of rising VD rates, pregnancies, and black market scandals. Pressure mounts. Will the iron rule bend further or snap? What price does victory exact when soldiers confront the enemy's humanity face to face? September 15, 1945. A crisp autumn morning in Hereford, headquarters of the British Army of the Rhine. Field Marshal Montgomery stands before a crowd of officers and men in the town square, his voice carrying over the assembled ranks. The non-fraternization ban, the iron curtain he'd drawn between victor and vanquished, is lifted, effective immediately. Cheers ripple through the troops. No more fines for a shared cigarette. No more courts-martial for a conversation. Children can be spoken to freely. Adults in public, too. Intimate relations remain discouraged, but the wall has crumbled. You can picture the relief washing over the soldiers. Private Wilkins, now stationed in a requisitioned hotel in Minden, feels it firsthand. For months, he's watched families scrape by on meager rations, 1,050 calories a day in some areas, less than prison fare. Women queue for hours at distribution points, their faces hollow, trading heirlooms on the black market for a tin of Spam or a bar of soap. Montgomery's final letter to the troops admits what everyone knows. The policy was unenforceable. Human nature, he writes, cannot be changed by an order. In the weeks that follow, the streets come alive. British lorries stop for hitchhiking Fräuleins heading to market. Dances spring up in community halls, chaperoned loosely by military police. Corporal Fletcher's romance with Greta blooms openly now. No more skulking in alleys. They walk arm in arm through Cologne's rubble, sharing dreams of a future beyond occupation. Greta introduces him to her mother, who serves ersatz coffee and thanks him quietly for the parcels he's slipped them. Not all are consensual trades. Survival still blurs lines. Many women, dubbed Veronicas by the troops for their supposed eagerness, exchange companionship for stockings, chocolate, and protection from the chaos. But darker currents swirl beneath. In rural Lower Saxony, Sergeant Brooks hears fresh reports. Isolated assaults by drunken patrols, women cornered in barns or bombed-out homes. British military courts act swiftly when complaints reach them. A lance corporal from the Black Watch sentenced to 5 years for rape near Osnabrück. Historians later note these cases were rare compared to other zones. Discipline holds firmer here. No mass vengeance like the horrors leaking from the east, where Soviet advances leave trails of unimaginable brutality. British commanders emphasize restraint. We're building a new Germany. One briefing stresses, not destroying what's left. Yet the power imbalance gnaws. A young woman in Hamburg, Anna Schmidt, confides to a Red Cross worker. British soldiers are polite, generous even, but the desperation drives choices. Food parcels from home keep troops flush. Germans starve. Relationships form, some genuine, many transactional. Pregnancies rise. VD clinics overflow. Officers worry about morale, security, and the optics back home. By winter, the thaw deepens. Montgomery departs for new commands, leaving the zone to successors focused on reconstruction. Coal mines reopen under British oversight. Food rations inch up. Soldiers coach football with local lads and share Nafi teas with families. But whispers persist. Not every Tommy is a gentleman. A few bad apples spoil the image. As 1946 dawns, Parliament debates marriage bans, still forbidden for German women. Soldiers write home pleading, will love conquer policy? Or will the scars of war keep conqueror and conquered forever apart? What happens when forbidden bonds become everyday reality, and some cross into the unforgivable? January 1946. A biting wind sweeps across the North German plain near Lüneburg Heath. Sergeant Alan Brooks, now promoted and transferred to a military government detachment, drives his jeep along a muddy track toward a requisition manor house serving as a local administration center. Snow dusts the pine forests, but the landscape feels barren. Farms stripped of livestock, villages hollowed out by Allied bombing and the refugee flood from the east. Brooks' breath fogs the windscreen as he pulls up to the gate, where a German woman in a threadbare coat waits, clutching a bundle of papers. You can almost feel the chill seep into your bones, the same cold that gnaws at the thousands of displaced persons trudging the roads, many of them women and children fleeing Soviet advances. The woman, Frau Hilde Brandt, a former schoolteacher from Pomerania, approaches hesitantly. Her husband is missing, presumed dead on the Eastern Front. She has come to register for rations and seek protection. Brooks, fluent in German from pre-war studies, listens as she recounts the journey. Weeks on foot, dodging marauding bands, witnessing horrors she won't name aloud. Her eyes, hollow and wary, tell the rest. Inside the manor, the air is warmer, heated by a roaring fire. British officers and German clerks work side by side, translating documents and issuing identity cards. The non-fraternization ban is a fading memory. Now the focus is denazification and rebuilding. Yet trust remains fragile. Hilda's case is typical. Thousands of such women, widowed or separated, turn to the occupiers for safety. Some find it, others do not. In the barracks at night, stories circulate. Private Wilkins, back from leave in England, overhears a group of men from the Royal Corps of Signals sharing grim accounts. A patrol in Schleswig-Holstein had come upon a remote farm where a young woman lay beaten. Her assailant a drunken Tommy who'd snapped after months of tension. The man was court-martialed and sent home in chains. But the woman, left to face village gossip, branded as the one who asked for it. Wilkins feels the weight of it, the knowledge that for every act of kindness, there are shadows where power turns ugly. Official records paint a restrained picture. British military courts in the zone convict dozens for sexual offenses between 1945 and 1946, with sentences ranging from months to years of hard labor. Rape convictions are documented but low, far fewer than in the American or Soviet zones, historians would later argue, thanks to stricter discipline and cultural restraint. Yet the numbers don't capture the unreported. Women too afraid or ashamed to speak, or those whose complaints are dismissed as consensual trades gone wrong. By spring, marriages begin, unofficial at first, then recognized. Corporal Fletcher weds Greta in a quiet ceremony in Cologne's ruins, officiated by a sympathetic chaplain. The couple faces obstacles. British policy still bars German wives from joining husbands in the UK until 1947. Fletcher's letters home plead for understanding. "She's not the enemy," he writes. "She's my future." Meanwhile, the black market thrives. Women known as Fräuleins or Ami whores in harsher tongues, though most are simply survivors, become fixtures outside barracks gates, trading cigarettes for favors. Some find steady protectors. Others drift into prostitution, driven by hunger. Red Cross reports note rising venereal disease, unwanted pregnancies, and a generation of occupation babies born to German mothers and Allied fathers. Brooks, overseeing a refugee camp, sees the human cost daily. A 16-year-old girl arrives with her infant, father unknown, possibly a British soldier, possibly worse. Brooks arranges for her to receive extra milk, but the stigma lingers. "We liberated them," he confides to a colleague, "but did we really?" As 1946 wears on, the occupation shifts from conquest to administration. Food rations stabilize, and schools reopen. Yet the emotional scars fester. Women who lost everything, soldiers who crossed lines they can't uncross. When does the line between liberator and occupier finally dissolve? And who pays the price for the crossing? Spring 1947. A quiet street in Bielefeld, British zone. Corporal Ian Fletcher stands outside the registry office in his best uniform, the silver buttons polished to a gleam, his hand clasped around Greta's. The war feels distant now, 2 years since VE Day, but the paperwork still brands her enemy alien. A sympathetic army chaplain has agreed to marry them anyway, in a small civil ceremony witnessed by 2 British NCOs and Greta's elderly aunt. As they emerge into the pale sunlight, Fletcher slips a simple gold band onto her finger, bought on the black market with months of saved pay. For the first time in years, Greta smiles without fear. You can imagine the hope in that moment, fragile but real. Across the zone, hundreds of similar stories unfold. The marriage ban finally lifts in late 1946. By 1947, thousands of British soldiers apply to bring German wives home. The War Office in London processes the forms slowly and suspiciously, background checks, interviews, and questions about Nazi Party membership. Many are approved. Fletcher's is. Greta boards a troop ship in Hamburg bound for Southampton, clutching a suitcase of patched clothes and a photo of her ruined family home. In England, she faces curious neighbors and whispered slurs of Jerry Bride, but also kindness from veterans who understand. Not every story ends in hope. In a displaced persons camp near Bergen-Belsen, the site of horrors now repurposed, Sergeant Brooks processes another case. A young woman named Maria Keller, once a forced laborer in a munitions factory, gave birth to a son 6 months ago. The father was a British private who'd promised marriage, then vanished on demobilization. Maria holds the baby close as Brooks stamps her ration card. "He said he'd send for us," she whispers in halting English. Brooks has seen dozens like her, left behind, stigmatized, raising Russenkinder or Ami-Kinder in a society that shuns them. Some fathers return, most do not. By 1948, the occupation softens further. The British Army of the Rhine shrinks as men demobilize. Civilians take over administration. Food shortages ease with the Marshall Plan's arrival. American aid funneled through all zones, lifting Germany from the brink. Cafes reopen. Dance halls fill with mixed couples. Yet the scars linger. Women who survived the immediate post-war months carry unspoken burdens. Assaults never reported, relationships born of desperation, and children whose fathers wore the wrong uniform. Historians pore over the records decades later. British authorities documented around 450 courts-martial for rape or serious sexual assault in their zone from 1945 to 1948, convictions that brought prison terms and dishonorable discharges. Compared to estimates of hundreds of thousands in the Soviet zone, the numbers speak to restraint, to a command structure that prized discipline. But numbers never tell the full story. Many women stayed silent, fearing reprisal or shame. Others found genuine partnership amid the ruins. Love that bridged the divide. Private Wilkins, now demobbed and back in Manchester, thinks of that woman at the checkpoint in Hamburg years ago. He never learned her name. Did she survive the hunger winter? Find safety? He reads in the papers about the German brides arriving in Britain, about the new Germany rising. Victory had come at a cost. Not just in battle, but in the messy aftermath where humanity clashed with power. As the last British troops prepare to leave a sovereign West Germany in the 1950s, the occupation fades into memory. Some couples build lives together across the channel. Some wounds heal quietly. Others never do. What remains when the uniforms are packed away and the rubble cleared? Is it reconciliation, or just the silence of things left unsaid? Autumn 1955. A modest terraced house in Manchester's suburbs. Thomas Wilkins, former private, now a factory foreman with a wife and 2 young sons, sits by the wireless, listening to the news of West Germany's entry into NATO. The announcer's voice speaks of reconciliation, of former enemies as allies against the new threat from the east. Wilkins stares at the flickering coal fire, memories stirring unbidden. 10 years since that dawn in Hamburg, the rubble and the pleading eyes. He never crossed the line himself, but he remembers those who did, the shouts in the alley, the sergeant's intervention. Did that girl survive? Find peace? You can feel the weight of decades pressing down. The way history layers over personal stories like dust on forgotten photographs. Across Britain, thousands of households echo Wilkins' quiet reflection. German war brides, over 15,000 by the end of the decade, have woven into the fabric of post-war life. Greta Fletcher, settled in Yorkshire with Ian and their 3 children, bakes apple strudel alongside Yorkshire pudding, teaching her daughters both languages. Neighbors who once whispered now invite her to tea. Yet not all journeys were smooth. Some brides faced hostility, signs in lodging houses reading "No dogs, no Irish, no Germans," or struggled with homesickness in a grey, rationed Britain still rebuilding from the Blitz. In Germany, the stories diverge further. The occupation children, estimated at around 10,000 fathered by British soldiers, grow up in a booming Wirtschaftswunder economy. Some, like Maria Keller's son, are raised by single mothers who never spoke the father's name. Others are adopted or institutionalized in the harsher early years. By the 1950s, organizations form to trace absent fathers. A few reunite, but most do not. Maria, remarried to a local mechanic, watches her boy excel in school, his fair hair a quiet reminder. She harbors no bitterness. Survival taught her pragmatism. But the unspoken lingers. Historians and survivors begin to speak as the Cold War solidifies alliances. Books emerge, diaries are published. Miriam Gebhardt's 2015 study estimates sexual violence across all zones, crediting the British with the lowest incidence due to discipline and cultural factors. No policy of sanctioned revenge, swift justice when proven. Yet personal testimonies surface. Women who endured assaults in those chaotic first months, silenced by shame or fear of disbelief. Others recount kindness, the Tommy who shared his rations without demand, the officer who protected a family from looters. Sergeant Brooks, retired in Kent with grandchildren on his knee, reads these accounts in the papers. He remembers Hilda Brandt, the refugee teacher. She found work in a British-run school, eventually emigrating to Canada. A letter arrived years later. Thank you for the humanity in inhuman times. Brooks folds it away, a small redemption. By the 1960s and beyond, the occupation fades into school lessons and documentaries. Young Germans visit Britain. British tourists flock to rebuilt cities. The complexities, the restraint amid temptation, the rare horrors amid widespread decency, form a nuanced legacy. Not the brutality of conquest, but the messy humanity of victory's aftermath. What does it say about us that, in the shadow of total war, restraint could prevail? That bridges could be built from the rubble of enmity? The soldiers and women of those years carried the truth quietly. Some in pride, some in regret. All in the knowledge that history is not just battles won, but the fragile threads of decency preserved when everything else crumbled.